You've probably clicked on this video because you want to start actively working towards your goals, but you've run out of motivation. Well, you came to the right place. In this podcast, we'll cover motivation in detail and provide you with tips to get started on the first step in the journey towards adherence, whether it's to start a new activity or to reignite the flame and get you back on track with practicing.
Alrighty, welcome back to Strategise 2. I'm Crow.
And I'm Vic.
As always, feel free to skip ahead if you want to any interesting parts you think in the video into different chapters, or come back to the video or keep it in the background while you do the dishes or whatever.
Yeah, so we made a main video about this topic, and we're going to be talking about similar concepts. It might be useful for you to watch the main video first, and then come back to this one after you've finished it.
Absolutely. So let's get into it.
All right. When you think about it, every action requires a base amount of motivation for us to do it. This is basically the core idea that we start the video with. If your motivation is above this level, great. If it's below this level, you won't actually initiate it.
So if you want to think about it in terms of a graph, just imagine a graph with a horizontal red line along the y-axis. And that's sort of the minimum amount of required effort that you need to put in to initiate something like aim training, studying, doing your taxes, or whatever. Now imagine that motivation line starting from 0 before you start the activity and going up as time goes on, right? You get more motivated to do something, and once it passes that red line of required effort, you actually initiate the task. You initiate doing your aim training or whatever.
Consistently stay above that level. That's the real task. Okay, so let's talk about adherence then, right? Because remaining above that level, above the red line, is what we call adherence.
Yeah, it's easy enough to be above the red line for a day, 2 days, whatever, an hour, 2 hours, but actually staying above that red line and consistently executing on your goals is what adherence is, and that's what we're aiming for.
Yes. So when we start our journey to become fully adherent to something, some activity, we start with no motivation for a given task whatsoever. We then get a first initial spark. We get inspired to do something. This may be whatever, right? It can be writing a song. You heard a song on the radio and now you want to write a song. Okay, boom. Suddenly there's this rush of motivation and we get started.
Yeah, or something like you watch like a really cool guitar solo or something and you get inspired to start playing guitar, for example. That initial spark is what's there.
You've probably felt this like a multitude of times this week alone, or maybe this month alone. But we don't actually always act immediately on this. We'll get back to this. But our goal essentially is to take this spark and turn it into motivation. Motivation is a little bit more long-term, a little bit, it's unstable, it waxes and wanes, but it is a more yearning, it's
a sort of more deep-rooted kind of desire for something, right? Rather than just the spark that might come and go 1 hour, 2 hours later, motivation, I feel like, is more goal-oriented. So it's that more deeper, more sustaining desire for something that keeps you going.
Exactly. But like we just said, motivation wanes and waxes, and unfortunately, on some days, your motivation will not succeed the red line or the requirement to do the tasks that we want to be doing. What we do to make sure that we actually do the task anyways is we use discipline. We use willpower and other tricks that we'll go into in this podcast. So we make sure that we still actually get our motivation, even though we don't really want to be doing it. We use our willpower to get ourselves over the red line and stick to the activity day after day.
And yeah, once we commit to the journey, right, the journey of adherence over a long period of time, eventually the task will become a habit, which is essentially the ultimate goal to get something to become long-term. So I guess as a conclusion, we start out with no motivation before we actually start something because we haven't started it yet. When we get that initial spark of inspiration, that spark of motivation to do the task, that's a great first step to actually get asses in gear. But it's not enough to actually sustain ourselves. We need something more sustainable, like motivation. But motivation on its own, like we said, also waxes and wanes, though it is more sustainable than inspirations per se. For example, we then try to supplement this motivation with things like discipline and willpower to ultimately create a habit that is more sustainable and long-term in the future.
Yes. Okay, let's get into it.
Alrighty. So let's start with the initial spark, as we said. How do we... I guess let's start out with what the spark is, right?
Yeah, essentially, the initial spark is a sort of rush of motivation that makes you want to restart or start an activity.
Yeah.
If you're not inspired to start, no amount of habits or whatever else you will do will help you, since without that inspiration, you haven't even started yet.
Yeah, so inspiration can be seen as the moment, essentially, where you realize that something that previously might have seemed unattainable is actually possible, right? The moment that you see, hang on a minute, this thing that I thought wasn't attainable for me, I can actually do this, right? It's something I can actually do, right? These sorts of realizations are what drive us forward to do things like New Year's resolutions, right? As unsustainable as they can be, that kind of shows that we have this sudden realization, this spark, this rush of motivation that drives us forward to take the first steps towards something.
Yeah, I think that's a very good example, a New Year's resolution. It's perfectly encapsulates the spark, because a lot of people will have this sudden urge to do something, mostly losing weight or maybe picking up an instrument or those kinds of things, or read more books.
Aim training more.
They'll have aim training, sure, yeah. They'll have the initial spark of motivation, but they fail to actually convert this into a long-term sustainable thing, and thereby fail their New Year's resolutions 2 months in, sometimes a little bit later. But like, just think about how many New Year's resolutions you have personally seen fail, right? From your own resolutions, but also your friends or families or people around you, right? They're not a great tool to really get something started if you don't then convert it. It's a starting place, but it's definitely not the end result that we were looking for.
Right, exactly as we said earlier on, right? It's that initial spark. It's kind of almost required, right, to get you moving in the beginning stages. But as we said, self-evidently, it doesn't seem to work in the long term, right? It lasts for maybe a few days, a week tops, and then wanes. So we need to convert it into something better. The good news is, though, if you're watching this, it's likely that you already have that initial spark of inspiration to improve yourself in esports-related activities, or anything else, really. So if you've gone as far as to search for this topic, or even just click on this video if it was recommended to you, it at least shows some sort of inspiration on your part, so good job on that. Now it's time to actually convert this inspiration, this spark of motivation, into something a bit more long-term. So let's get on that.
Yeah, let's first take a step back and explain to the viewers how you can harness a spark. What I mean by that is there is some things we can do to make this spark not only happen more consistently when we lose motivation for a long period. For example, let's say we really wanted to aim train for a bunch of times. We've been practicing and then suddenly something happened and we stopped doing it. How can we get back on track after maybe 2 weeks of not doing anything? Well, there's some tricks that we can do to make the spark happen again, and also happen more extreme, so we can actually get a good boost to get started from. Because that first initial jump, maybe see it as a jump in the water in the swimming pool when you go swimming, right? That initial jump gets you quite far already, but yeah, after that we'll have to paddle with our arms and swim. Yeah,
so basically, how do we harness this spark, right? How do we get more of this spark? If we want to commit to something, we first need to have that sudden sense of inspiration. So how do we actually get those inspiration? How can we do that, essentially? One of the ways will be, for esports related things, watching pros play, right? Watching a pro game and getting that sudden burst of inspiration of, fuck, that was cool, right? I want to be able to get to that level at some point, or I want to be as good as that. I want to get a cool clip that looks just like that. I want to get to their level, right? That kind of sudden spark of inspiration is great in esports.
Yeah, it's a great thing to remind yourself of your long-term goals, which is basically that, right?
Yep.
If you want to become a pro, seeing other pros play, watching pro tournaments, watching videos of pros or streamers, right, can really give you that spark again and be like, oh, that is why I was doing this. That is why I was even putting up with aim training in the first place, is because I want to get to that level. Remind yourself of your long-term goals, and that can really create a spark again.
Exactly. Yeah, just watching more of the people that you look up to, basically, right? Those kind of things.
Additionally, let's say you're in a team and you've been, or just practicing on your own, you've been practicing, but you've not really seen or felt the need to do so, or you've not seen the fruits of that yet. What we can do is, for example, if you've been scrumming in a team for weeks or months, it can be super, super motivating and can create a spark by actually playing a tournament. Because then you get reminded of, oh, this is the feeling I was looking for. This is why I've been doing it. You're surrounded by all these other people that are really competitive and engaged, and all of them are aim training. You're like, okay, with a little bit of practice, I can beat these opponents, right? I can beat these opponents. I can start playing and winning tournaments. That can create a spark in and of itself.
Exactly. Yeah, being sort of at that threshold where you're performing slightly above your abilities, where you're actually in a competitive environment that gets the juices flowing. Essentially, great way to actually get a spark of inspiration.
And where you're pushed as well, because now
Exactly.
you're a little bit beyond your comfort zone.
Yep.
You're being pushed into something that you've not done in a few weeks, right? If you haven't played a tournament in a few weeks, you get reminded of, okay, this is the level that we want to be playing at, or even go well beyond this, right?
Yep. Think like skills, for example, that you might have been harnessing over the past few months or years, for example, that you might not have been able to use in ranked, for example. Being able to use those in actual tournaments and seeing the fruits of your labor, as Vic said, great way to have the spark, essentially. Additionally, don't surround yourself with shitty people, right, who bring you down. Be around people you actually find inspirational. This kind of loops back to the thing that I said earlier on, watching the people you look up to, essentially, more and more. But also, try to surround yourself with people with that same sort of goal in mind, right? Don't surround yourself with people who constantly bring you down. Whenever you have a goal in place, they make fun of it or whatever. Be around people who encourage you, right? Be inspired by the people around you, not unencouraged, disencouraged rather.
For example, if I tell my friends, like, hey, I want to write a song, you can have two different reactions from your groups of friends, right? You can have like, oh my God, Vic, I don't think this is for you. Like, or they might even laugh at me like, you writing a song, right? Or you can have people around you say like, oh, that's such a good idea, right? Go for it.
Exactly, yeah.
That can make a huge difference.
Exactly.
And then lastly, I think a great way to get a spark is when you've had a negative experience. This might have applied to weight loss, for example, where you look at your summer pictures or in the mirror and you realize like, oh my God, I'm really out of shape.
Bro, I've let myself go this summer, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, that can have a negative experience.
Right.
But instead of like wailing in that negative experience and staying there, you can say, okay, let me actually do something about this. This is in my control. I can do something about that. And you can create a spark for yourself by looking at that and saying, okay, Vic, it's been enough this summer. Let's get into shape, right? We're going to do this, create the spark, and then we need to transform the spark into something more.
These kinds of negative experiences aren't negative per se, right? They can be negative experiences with positive sort of push. Like it pushes you towards a positive direction. It might be a negative experience in the short term, but if it pushes you towards a positive thing, that's good, right? Similarly, for example, in games, right? I've recently played a game with my friend who he was trying to flank the enemy team in Valorant. Got behind them, was about to get a really cool clip about three enemies right in front of him who don't see him, and he was going to win the round for us by doing this flank. He misses his first two shots, panics, then loses the round, right? Super embarrassing moment. Something we've all experienced, right? In one form or another at some point in our careers. That kind of an embarrassing moment drives you forward to be like, damn, bro, I really need to get my ass in gear. I need to get better at the game. You know, he even asked me after the game, like, what do I do? Like, how do I prevent those kinds of things? It's those kinds of negative experiences that can actually have a positive outcome in the end because they drive us forward to try and improve.
Yeah, but keep in mind that once you have that spark, this spark won't last very long. It's like most times, especially, for example, if I wake up and I'm like, oh, I really want to write a song, I might have that for a couple of hours, maybe a day, maybe 2 days. A week max, but nothing. It won't carry me through becoming a musician. That spark alone is not enough. Yeah. So it's giving us some initial momentum. Let's turn that momentum into something long-lasting.
Exactly.
Okay? And we do that by converting it to motivation first.
Right. So motivation, I guess, to put into really technical terms, it's the process that initiates, guides, and maintains goal-oriented behaviors. Right. Whilst inspiration is the short-term spark that gets you excited. Motivation is a longer-term, goal-oriented inner desire, right? It's what causes you to act, whether it's getting a glass of water to reduce thirst, read a book to, gain knowledge, or finish up a training session because you want to improve your gameplay. I don't want to have embarrassing moments like I mentioned in Valorant, CS, Siege, or whatever. While inspiration is sort of a loud burst of excitement for something, motivation is a more sort of quiet, deeper desire that's more long-lasting.
Yeah. For motivation to work effectively, what we need a clear end goal. Yeah. So you need to be working towards something. Yes, you've gotten the spark to maybe write a song, and the motivation could be, oh, I want to write that song, and writing a song could be one day, but it could also be multiple days. But let's say you've gotten a spark to improve at the game. Now let's create a clear end goal. What does that mean? What does that look like? What are we working towards? What do we need to do to get there?
Exactly. Whilst you might be inspired, like Vic said, to write that song, there's no real clear vision that you can see yourself working towards, right? It's a sort of more vague idea that you've put into your mind. It's more of a wish than an actual long-term desire. So we have to turn this short-term desire, this vague idea of what we want to do, into a more long-term, goal-oriented, clear thing that we're working towards.
Yeah. For example, for that case, it's like, hey, I want to hit this rank. I want to become immortal in Valorant, right? That can be something, an end goal that we work towards.
Exactly. Yeah, instead of saying I just want to, be better, or I want to, do this, do that, whatever, be a bit more specific about it. Have a more clear end goal. Be like, by the end of this season or by the end of next season, I want to be immortal, right? That's a clear intent, sort of intent related. That's a really.
Or I want to have joined a team and started playing tournaments at, like, for example, level, or I want to hit face at level 9 or on CSGO, those kinds of things, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, being inspired is great, right? Don't get it wrong. Don't get it twisted, right? It's a great, important first step that needs to happen. That initial spark is important to get you started. But the spark will die out, and if we don't turn it into action, it will essentially not become anything long term, right? You might be inspired to pick up an instrument, but if we don't translate that spark into action, we'll never get anywhere.
Yeah, so the first thing that we need to do is start doing. Yes, you can say, hey, I want to start losing weight. Okay, now let's start doing it. You want to say, hey, I want to start practicing my aim and getting better aim. Okay, open up the range and start practicing, right?
Yep.
The moment we commit to a plan and we start to actually execute on this plan, and we really get ourselves to start acting and doing, that's the only way we can start getting somewhere.
Exactly.
Because inspiration without a plan, without intention, is just a wish. You wish you were better at aiming. Okay, if you don't actually start aim practicing, you're never going to get that. It's always going to remain a dream or something, right?
Yep.
Let's start practicing. That's the first step.
One big trap that a lot of people fall into whenever they're doing, whether it's New Year's resolutions or even like more, I guess, short term than that, being like, okay, next week I'm going to start doing my weight loss journey. Why next week? Why not start like literally right now? The next meal that you eat, why not make it a salad or make it something lower calorie? Why do you have to wait till next week to do this sort of thing? People have this sort of idea in their minds where they have to have a starting point, and that's the starting point that I'm going to have.
Mm-hmm.
No, just start. Just do it right now, right? Act. Don't just wish, act.
And that's especially true when it comes to the spark, because you might have the spark on Tuesday, like, oh, I really want to start losing weight. And you say, okay, I'm going to start next week, Monday, right? By then, the spark is down. Exactly. Now you're only relying on the motivation, and because you didn't use any tricks or haven't started.
Yeah, you haven't even done anything to build that motivation yet. You still
that motivation doesn't exist.
I guess just like a last thing there as well, it's that once you actually get started, an additional positive of that is that you get motivated even more, right? Once you actually start something and you go, holy crap, I'm actually doing this right now. I've gotten started. I'm like 3 days into my diet. I'm 3 days into my aim training journey, and I've already seen some improvements, whatever. That breeds more motivation, which then breeds more motivation, which then breeds more motivation. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And also, starting actually forces you to think about what you're doing.
Right.
When we actually start, so I might be like, okay, I want to improve my aim. Now I open the range, and now I'm forced to think about, how am I going to improve my aim? What am I going to do? And I'm forced to kind of plan out things. I'm forced to say, okay, I'm going to do this type of aim practice for this long, at least today,
right,
and probably tomorrow, and the day after, and maybe the day after again, right? You're forced to think about how you're going to achieve your long-term goal, which is super important for when we actually get to adherence. We want to get to adherence of a thing, a routine, right? That routine can be aim practicing, can be practicing your lineups, can be dieting, right? There's also a routine. All of those things, but we need to first understand what that entails. And you're forced to do that by actually starting. So start, great first thing. Now, motivation can be split up into two categories. We can talk about, in psychology, we can talk about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is you wanting to do something because it's inherently satisfying to you. This could be something like browsing Reddit or YouTube, right? It's naturally interesting and enjoyable, so you do it automatically. You don't even have to motivate yourself for it. I don't have to say like, oh, Vic, you are going to watch YouTube today. Come on, you can do it, right?
You can do it, mate.
Yeah.
No, the intrinsic motivation is the stuff that you already want to do, right? The stuff that's already really satisfying to you, that doesn't require that sort of willpower.
Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, refers to doing something because you want to earn a reward or avoid punishment.
Yeah, so these can be like physical rewards or punishments, or psychological rewards and punishments, such as someone being disappointed in you, not getting paid from your job or whatever, right? For example, you go to work not because generally, unless you love your job, not because you're intrinsically motivated to do so, right? It's not inherently satisfying to you. You don't love doing it. but you're extrinsically motivated to do it. There are external things that require you to do it. Yeah, right. You get paid to go there. So if we don't go, you won't get paid. So there's that extrinsic motivation that pushes you to be like, I have to go because I don't want to lose my job and I want to earn money, right? There's extrinsic motivation there, whereas the intrinsic might not exist. Same thing, for example, if you're reading a book, right? If you enjoy the storytelling in the book, you might be intrinsically motivated to read that book. But if you're reading a book to learn something because you have to study for a test, you might be more extrinsically motivated because you kind of have to do it. You don't want to do it, but you kind of have to.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've set up these two terms, intrinsic and extrinsic. Let's look at both and see how we can improve both. So for intrinsic motivation, visible feedback is a super important tool. Generally speaking, meaningful positive feedback is one of the most crucial factors in maintaining motivation.
Yeah.
It can be feedback like the satisfaction of seeing yourself actually improve at something, or feedback provided by others in the form of compliments or comments from other players, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so how do you get this visible feedback or progress to boost your intrinsic motivation? A great way to do that is through stats, right? Statistics, actually having that raw data in front of you that says, yes, you have been improving, right? Things like aim trainers, having a graph that says you've been improving for the past 30 days by this amount on average every single day. That's a direct piece of evidence right there, data point right there that can boost your motivation, intrinsic motivation, because it's visible feedback of progress. Right?
In Valorant, you have the range and you have the timer. So, for example, you set the range to 50 bots, see how fast you can do that, and then you can probably see the time it takes you to kill those 50 bots. Go down and down and down and down the further along your journey you get. Yeah,
over time, you'll just naturally see that progress. Things like progress trackers, right? You might have a habit tracker, for example, that tracks how much you do something on a weekly basis, right? Just something that's visible and immediately gives you some sort of feedback is great to boost your intrinsic motivation.
Two others are, for example, clips, right? If I have some good plays, I like to clip them and look at them back. Right. That's also feedback. That's me looking at how well I'm playing right now, at least have played this last month. If I go over the clips of the last month, I can actually see like, oh my God, I've really improved this last month. Look at how many more clips I have, but also look at the quality of the clips. They're so much better now.
I feel like with the clips thing, it doesn't even have to be necessarily like progress based. It can just be like, that was a really cool clip, and seeing that clip, I mean, for me, for example, if I watch a really cool clip that I popped off in a game, for example, and I watch that back, that makes me want to play the game more and improve even more, right? Just seeing that. It doesn't necessarily have to tell me you're better than you were before, but just seeing that be like that cool clip, just in and of itself makes me want to improve more.
Yeah, that's very true too. And on top of that, success, right? Actually ranking up or actually playing tournaments and being successful in those tournaments can be a huge like motivator or booster your motivation, because nothing hits as well as you finally achieving somewhat the goal you've set for yourself.
Right.
So every step, every good, clear, visible step towards that goal can be so motivating. Success is like one of the best things that can happen to us for the motivation.
Right.
And when you have success, make sure you remind yourself of that success and really let it sink in. Like celebrate that. Celebrate that you're doing well. Celebrate that you have lost a kilogram when weight lossing, or celebrate when you've ranked up. Don't just like, oh, okay, and click on, right? No, actually take the time. Take like a minute or something and really let it sink in. Hey, I've been working towards this for the past something days, and now I'm doing it.
Yeah, I'm actually getting there, right? We can sometimes go into this routine where we're automating all our actions, just being like, I have to improve, especially in fitness-related sort of fields. But actually taking a step back a couple months in and being like, damn, this last month has been really good, right? Just take a moment, right? Actually let it sink in, all the progress that you've made. Really great motivator, really good to keep your motivation high.
Okay, let's talk about another way we can improve intrinsic motivation. Celebrating these successes is an example of positive self-talk, which is the second way to improve intrinsic motivation. Positive self-talk refers to us saying to ourselves, hey, we're doing it. We did it. It's going well. Or things like, we can do this. We will make it. We will be successful in what we're trying to be successful in, right?
Yep.
One key aspect of this is repetition. Make sure that you actually say it so often that even your opponents believe it. Right. This is something that an MMA fighter has said in an interview. I can't quite remember which MMA fighter it was, but he said like, I've said to myself, like, I am the best MMA fighter. I am the best MMA fighter. I'm the best. I'm the best. I'm the best. Not just to himself, but also to interviews, right? So much that his opponents eventually started to believe it, right? Like, oh yeah, he is the best, right? Or he might be. That's the type of positive self-talk we want to strive towards. Obviously,
there's been lots of studies. I mean, like some of them will link right now on the screen, right? So you can go and look at them as well if you want to. Where positive self-talk in athletes has actually resulted in like literal physical improvements in their performance, right? Positive self-talk you might just think it's a mental thing. It's not. It translates into the physical as well, right? Our brains are really powerful machines. Talking to yourself positively, that positive self-talk really does boost you forward, and there's a lot of science to back that up.
Yeah. Obviously, don't be obnoxious about it. I'm not telling you to be toxic. I'm not telling you to be to go up to everyone and say like, oh no, I'm the best. No, I'm the best. No, just do it to yourselves in a positive way. Don't talk down upon yourself, but also don't be obnoxious or talk down others. You can say, oh, I'm super good without saying, oh, you're trash, right? That's not the same thing.
Yeah, don't be toxic about it. Just, boost yourself up without bringing others down in the process.
And you can also hype others up. You can hype your teammates up and give them intrinsic motivation by also positively encouraging them. What's important to note, though, is that research has stated that it's important that feedback is sincere. So make sure that it at least sounds sincere if it's not completely right, but don't say like, oh, good job, man, right? That doesn't really do anything for their motivation.
Yeah, so another way to boost your intrinsic motivation, we're on a roll here, got a lot of tips, is short-term goals, right? Ticking off your short-term goals, whether it's, kill 300 bots in the range today, win 2 ranked games, do this, do that, whatever, will give you a burst of motivation and give you something to look back on every single day, right? If you look back on the day that you've had right now and been like, these were my goals, I've accomplished all of them, that's a great short-term boost, right? That burst of motivation will sustain you for longer periods of time once you have more and more of these every single day, right? These short-term goals are the things that, in the short term, get you off the couch and out of bed. They enable more frequent opportunities for you to actually get out there and work towards your goal.
A short-term goal can also be like, oh, I want to play 10 minutes of aim training every day for the couple next, let's say 3 days, 5 days or something. That's a relatively short time period. But you can say like, okay, I want to be able to do 10 minutes of training every single one of those days if you're really struggling. Maybe say half an hour once you're a little bit more into the groove. That can be a short-term goal as well. And ticking that off, being like, oh, I did it. Yes. Take motivation out of that. Take those goals off. Make them obvious. If you have a whiteboard, that can be a super great motivator. Write down your goals. Tick them physically off, or use a Word document or whatever. But actually ticking
Google
them
calendar, off. Right? Having a sticky note, right? There are a bunch of things. Habit trackers, anywhere.
Yeah, but actually ticking them off can be a huge motivator. So make it obvious that you've completed it. Don't just be like in your head, like, oh, check mark. No. Like, make it an activity. Celebrate that you hit your goal and whatever. All of that can give you motivation.
Yeah, like one good example of that is like, I forgot which one it was, but there was a to-do list app that I recently downloaded. I forgot the name. Maybe TickTick. That might have been the one, but maybe another one as well on Android. Where every time you ticked off a goal, it would like show like an explosion on the screen and like a really like celebrating sort of emoji spam on the screen. It's like, it might sound cringe, but it's like that little burst of dopamine whenever you tick off a goal. It's actually great, right? It makes you want to get more stuff done.
Yeah, it's what makes us motivated in the end.
Another thing to note is that you should make your goals positive, not negative. And what I mean by that is a lot of people, when they go on, for example, some fitness journey, they want to say things like, don't eat bad foods, right? Don't eat fast food. Don't eat, terrible foods, all this kind of stuff. That might not be the best wording to actually get those goals going. It might be better to say something like, be more inclusive about good foods, right? Have more good foods in your diet rather than saying, cut out all the bad foods, right? That kind of slight mindset change can actually have a huge impact.
Yeah, it's a lot more motivating to say, I ate healthy than saying, I didn't eat unhealthy.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Next, similarly for when we started to create the spark, people who bring you down are a really good way to lose motivation.
Yeah.
You want to be around people that are encouraging to see your progress and that celebrate with you when we actually have something to celebrate, right?
Yeah.
Those kinds of small interactions can really boost your motivation as well.
Yeah, I mean, whether in a team or play casually with friends, just be encouraging and positive towards each other, right? I'm not saying be cringe about it, but just like point out positives when you see them, right? Like be positive towards each other's visible
Mm-hmm.
progress. This is not only good for the person you're encouraging, right? When you encourage someone else, it's not just good for them, but it's a self-feeding spiral because the environment you're in now breeds more and more positivity, which helps everyone improve, including you, consciously and unconsciously. So even if you're thinking about it as purely selfishly, complimenting others in your team about their positives helps you too.
Yeah. And encouraging someone else makes it more likely that they'll encourage you in the future as well.
Exactly.
If you've broken that first barrier of you two encouraging each other, that's going to be a very positive relationship. It's maybe a bit of a rough word, but some sort of relationship dynamic where you two can now start encouraging each other. It becomes a habit, it becomes automatic. And if you have someone like that around you on your journey to adherence, that's going to be a huge boost.
Absolutely. I mean, whenever you watch the pro games, right, with comms included, you'll always hear the pros after a great round for someone being like, dude, you're insane. You're the best. Oh my God, what the hell was that? Sort of thing, right? Just be encouraging towards each other, and it helps everyone on the team improve. So, moving on to extrinsic motivation now. Just as a brief recap, as we said, extrinsic motivation is the stuff where you're motivated to do it, not because you want to do it inherently, but rather because you kind of have to, right? You have to go to your job because you have to get paid. Not because you love it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it was reading the book to study rather than to enjoy the book,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and extrinsic motivation, just to be clear, isn't bad. It's something very important to get your routines going as well. We all as humans need some extrinsic motivation to push us forward in our goals, as well as intrinsic motivation. So here are some ways to boost your extrinsic motivation.
So one way we can actually start getting and feeling extrinsic motivation is by making a commitment. In high school or university or whatever you're doing in education or work even, you've probably dealt with deadlines, right? You felt the pressure of a deadline motivating you to do something. That motivation, in that case, might not always have been positive, but it was a driving force that got you to act. Mm-hmm. Making a commitment and holding yourself accountable to that commitment can be incredibly extrinsically motivated. So, for example, having an accountability partner or teammate that you work with and both of you do the aim routine or do the practicing routine every single day, you being accountable to someone can really put some psychological pressure on you to stick to the goal. It will make it easier for you to keep doing the activity on the hard days. On the easy days, it will be easy for you, but on the hard days, it can be much easier. And similarly, for him or her, your training partner, they will also feel the same way, and maybe on different days, right? If you're both having a rough day, you can still encourage each other and motivate each other. Or when you're doing a good day and they're having a rough day, you will very much likely be the inspiring presence that they needed at that day.
Yeah, so it's a give and take is everything, right? I mean, even anecdotally, this is true, right? When we have a project, right, where we probably feel a little bit extra pressure if we're in a team environment than if we were just solo, right? Because we have extra people now that kind of rely on us to get our asses in gear. Or this could be the case, I mean, even anecdotally for us, right? We're doing YouTube together, me and Vic. When on days where I'm not maybe pulling my weight, I kind of feel, oh, okay, I should be doing some more YouTube work right now because Vic's been doing a lot of work recently, so I need to get my ass in gear. And yeah, that'll be my boosting force extrinsically, right? I don't want to let down Vic, so it'll boost me extrinsically to actually get my work done.
Or Crow sending me something that he's made, right? I was not feeling super motivated today. I might be slacking in the morning. He sends me, hey Vic, I've worked on this. Look at this. Can you give me some feedback here? And I'll be like, okay, this looks amazing. So that will give me motivation. Or like, I'm excited for you in terms of training results, right? He might send me like, oh, look at this. I hit my new high score or new record. And I'll be like, okay, that's very cool. But also it will kind of shame me or like put some stress on me. Be like, oh, I should have done some work as well. He's been working. I'm not, right? Let me get my ass in gear as well.
There as well, like as we said earlier on, negative encouragement isn't necessarily negative in and of itself, right? Sometimes this negative sort of, I don't even like calling it negative, but like this sort of this pressure that you have added to get yourself to work more can sometimes be a really positive way to actually get stuff done, right? And I mean, it doesn't necessarily just have to be negative, is basically my point.
Yeah. Obviously, if we can use the positive side, well, quote unquote positive, right? Mm-hmm. If we can use that type of motivation, great. Yeah. But our goal is to be adherent, which means do it every single day. And our positive, quote unquote again, motivation will not
always be there.
Sufficient every single day. So we'll need some other tricks to get us to adhere. So One other way where commitment is a great tool. So you might not have an accountability partner or might not find someone that plays the same games around you. What you can do is you can tell your friends about your goals. So let's say you want to lose 10 kilos, right? Okay, tell your friends you're going to do that. Tell your friends, hey, by this summer, I'm planning to lose 10 kilograms. And now you psychologically have made a promise to your friends, and you'll be more likely to keep the promise because you're going to disappoint them if you don't.
Yeah,
that's also
this has also been studied extensively, where just the knowledge that people know of your goal makes people more likely to reach those goals than not telling anybody. So, I mean, this again is also scientifically been proven. We'll again show some evidence of that on screen. But yeah, just having that extrinsic motivation of somebody knows I'm on this journey, so I don't want to not really let them down, but rather I want to follow through with it, right? The thing that I promised.
To translate this into esports terms again, what you could do is you could also join a competition. So a tournament, right? If you start, like a tournament is a 1 day thing or 2 day thing, right? But a competition, like an actual season of a league, for example, right? Like a league where you play with other teams. Every single day that you can see, oh my God, I have a match on Monday, which is the deadline. You can get extrinsically motivated for practicing for that match, because otherwise you'll be like, okay, I'm going to let my teammates down, but also I want to win that match, right?
Exactly.
So by committing, by signing up to a tournament, which is some sort of commitment, you can extrinsically motivate you to stick to your goals.
Yeah, having something on the line, essentially, as a general rule of thumb, is going to be a great way to extrinsically motivate you. I mean, this is why a lot of times when people, run half marathons, for example, they'll have a fundraiser, right? They'll ask their friends to give some money, and that adds that extrinsic motivation, that sort of pressure where they have to stick to it now, right?
Yep.
That sort of principle.
One thing I also thought of when you just said that is getting a coach. If you get a coach, you'll start to be accountable to them.
Yeah.
He will extrinsically motivate you by rewarding you, punishing you, but also just you feeling like you're letting him down, or you paying for something like the coaching sessions and now wanting to get the most out of your payment because you're like, oh my God, I'm paying for this. Let me actually put in the work as well, right?
Right.
Those are all things where you can get yourself extrinsically motivated to keep up with this goal.
Exactly, yeah.
And the final way we can commit to something or make a commitment to ourselves is by making a road plan. This is also a great way to boost extrinsic motivation. Write out, hey, on this day, I'm going to do this. On this day, I'm going to do this. And be specific. Say around this and this time. So literally say from 1 a.m. to 2 p.m. 1 p.m.
That's a mad training session, bro. 1 a.m. to 2 p.m. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
13-hour training session.
I mean, from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., I'm going to practice this and this and this. Now, when the day comes and you see on your calendar, you see on your Google Calendar app, right, hey, time for practicing, you can shame or guilt yourself into doing that, or at least make it feel awful for not doing it, which will make it less likely, way less likely that you're going to skip again tomorrow.
Right. Again, the words shame and guilt there might have negative connotations, but again, don't have that mindset of it's necessarily bad inherently. If it's for a good sort of end goal, and it's not so negative psychologically and mentally draining that it's actually going to be detrimental to you, then, I mean, this sort of pressure on you is actually a good thing. It's what boosts us forward, right? We need this added pressure. So having, as Vic said, this sort of training plan in place, it's set in stone to be like, this is my training session. I'm going to stick to this 5 days a week, 6 days a week, whatever it might be, is a great extrinsic motivator.
The road to adherence is not an easy one. Right. If we want to become a pro athlete that practices every single day, we're going to go through some tough times, and we're going to have to use some of the tricks that we have in store, all of the tricks we have in store actually, to make us adhere to our training plan before it becomes a habit and becomes easier. Obviously, everything that we talked about here, it's going to get easier over time, but we'll get back to that in a second.
Yep, and it all has limits, right? Don't push yourself to the degree where it's going to be more detrimental to you, obviously, but don't just think that it's all going to be la-di-da, easy time to just become the best.
So when you're setting up your training plan, make sure that you're specific, like I just said, but also be realistic. There's nothing more demotivating than having an impossible task ahead of you. Break the tasks up into smaller parts and build from there. Set a realistic goal and try to reach that within 2 weeks or like a month, right? Make sure that that entire road plan is doable. If you set yourself up for failure, it's going to be super demotivating.
Exactly.
Don't say like, okay, starting next week, I'm going to start training 10 hours every single day. No, start small, build up over time, and be realistic. Make it something you can manage, because ticking off that short-term goal, remember, will also boost our intrinsic motivation. We'll want to continue more.
Even if it's something as small as, every single time when I go into a game, right before that, I'm going to shoot 50 bots in the range. That's tiny. You can do that within a single minute, right? 60 seconds to shoot 50 bots, for example, right? That's easy as hell to do, right? But it's a good starting point that you can build on top of as time goes on.
Yeah. If you're having trouble with setting a realistic plan, a coach here can help again.
Yeah.
A coach will understand, because they've gone through the same road plans as you have. They've had the same skill level as you had. At some point, they'll understand, and they'll have helped people your level as well. They'll understand what your level means and what kind of training session works best for you specifically. They can tailor and help you tailor the plan to your liking.
Right. One thing to note, though, about this sort of training plan tip that we've given, it's to beware the idea of motion versus action, right? A lot of times when people have these goals in their minds of, I want to lose this amount of weight, for example, right, within the next 2 months, they'll spend the first week, that inspiration, that motivation they have, and use all that motivation to come up with an amazing training plan, do this, do that, this plan to do dieting, this and that, whatever. That doesn't actually get you any closer to your overall goal, though, right? You're not in action, you're just in motion.
Once that training plan actually starts, they've ran out of motivation. And now what?
Exactly. So it's important, right? Planning is very, very important. Don't get us wrong. But a lot of times people will sort of trick themselves into thinking they're being productive by just doing the planning section really, really heavily, really thoughtfully. Same thing with sort of training, for aim training, for example, right? You might watch all these videos, write down the spreadsheet of what you're going to do, this and that, whatever. But actually doing the thing is what's going to get you to your overall goal, not doing this planning to the most sort of micro level possible, right? This is the difference between being in motion and being in action. We want to be in action. We don't just want to be in motion.
Yeah, like Rose said, researching the best way to aim train is good, but don't trick yourself into thinking you've been productive. No, you've not started yet. This is before we start, right? Preparation is good. Don't let it become procrastination.
Exactly. And I guess a good example for that is a lot of times when people want to get into fitness-related things, what they'll do is they'll try and find the best diet possible, the most perfectly researched training method possible, all this kind of stuff. They'll switch between the different new shiny things, new training method here, new diet here, whatever. But doing all this research doesn't get you any closer. So as we said, one final time, take action, right? Don't just plan. Actually take action.
And once you do start getting action and you start adhering for small amounts of time, reward yourself. Rewards can help to increase your extrinsic motivation. It can be something to look forward to because we want to earn it. We can be strict with yourself though, right? Only actually reward yourself when you've achieved what you set out to do. Otherwise it loses some of its effect. But when we reward ourselves, we can have something to look forward to by the end of the week. Okay, it's just one more training session, one more day of dieting before I get this and this reward that I've set for myself. That can be incredibly motivating.
Exactly.
Some tips there. Small monetary value, big psychological value. We can spend a lot of our money on these kinds of things, but it's going to run out quickly. Make sure, especially when you have a coach or you have a teammate, because you can reward your own teammates as well. Or as a coach, you can reward your players by giving them a big psychological value reward. For example, being man of the match. That can be super, especially for competitive people, that can be super rewarding. Reward them in front of other potential participants, right? If you're a coach, reward them not private on a one-on-one call or in DMs. No, reward them right there after the match in front of the entire team, because the other players will be like, oh, next match, that's going to be me.
Exactly. And the person that has been motivated is going to try even harder next time to be like, hell yeah, that felt good. I want it again.
So be cautious with rewards as well. Rewards can work really well when we want to get ourselves to do an activity that's not really appealing. But we can also become over-dependent upon such rewards, right?
Right.
And in that case, when we don't receive them or we don't have the money this week to do it, or we've already gotten so many rewards last month, every week we've gotten a reward, we might get demotivated because I don't need a fifth reward, right?
Exactly.
So be careful with how many rewards you do, how big the rewards are, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, this sort of stuff has been studied as well, right? There was this one study, we'll again link it on screen right now, where children were rewarded for doing something that they already enjoy, right? Playing with a certain toy, for example. And the moment they actually got rewarded for playing with the toy they already wanted to play with, they actually were less motivated to play with that toy, right? They actually started playing with other toys then, right? Because it's that sort of counterintuitive effect of rewards.
So keep that in mind when you're applying rewards. It's a good trick that we can use. Don't over-rely on it.
Exactly.
So now we've looked into both extrinsic and intrinsic motivations separately, right? We've looked at, how can we boost either one? There's also some things we can do to boost both at the same time. For example, competition. Not the competition of, I'm going to join a tournament. No, competition between friends and teammates. If you have some sort of competition between your friends, like, I want to become the best of my friends, but they also want to be that at the same time, you can start pushing each other. You can start wanting to outdo each other. You'll be like, okay, you'll be like psychologically thinking, is he aim practicing today? Because if he is, I'm going to aim practice twice as long, because otherwise I'm not going to like improve as quickly as he is, right? That sort of competition can be incredibly motivating.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the sort of scenario where you're using both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation simultaneously, right? You're intrinsically motivated to be better than the rest of your teammates, I guess, in this competition setting. At the same time, you're being extrinsically motivated by your teammates. They're watching you, right? You have this idea of, they're all watching me. They know I want to be the best or whatever. And that added pressure is extrinsic. A similar thing here is, like, for example, if you're playing an agent in Valorant, right? I'm a Skye main, but Skye's not played that often compared to other agents, but when I do see a Skye on the enemy team as well, I suddenly have that burst of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation of, okay, intrinsically, I want to be the best Skye main in this game, not the other guy. And extrinsically, my teammates look at me being like, okay, there's two Skyes here, let's see which one of them performs the best, right? So combination of both can be really great.
Yeah. Another example of a tool that can boost both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is goal setting. We've kind of hinted and tipped upon these, right, with the short-term goals, but setting a goal in general, long or short-term goal, will be intrinsically and extrinsically motivating to you. Intrinsically, because you will want to pass the goal, but extrinsically, because every time you don't pass a goal and you can't tick it off, and you can see the list of goals you haven't ticked off this week or last week get longer and longer, that will be extrinsically motivating you into getting your ass back in gear.
Right. I mean, this is sort of like, it's this sort of accumulation of tasks you haven't completed. Like in university, for example, if you're a university student and you have a lot of things to do, you might really be chilled about it. Like in the first couple of weeks, like, I have lots of time to do this. But once time starts ticking and ticking and ticking, you realize, okay, all this stuff I have to do is start accumulating so much, I need to actually do this stuff, right? So you get that extrinsic boost of motivation to be like, okay, let's actually do this.
Yeah. Make sure that when you set your goals, they are measurable, realistic, and somewhat challenging. The measurable means, it's not ambiguous whether you did it, right? Did you, like, it's not, I want to get better. That's kind of like, did I get better? Did I not get better?
No, it's I want to reduce my 100 bots time by 3 seconds.
To this,
right?
Yes, to this value. Make it realistic. Don't set a goal that's impossible to reach, because that's incredibly demotivating.
Yep.
But also, a challenging goal can be a lot more motivating than an easy goal.
So, I mean, it might sound contradictory to what we said earlier about just do something, right? Even if it's 50 bots in a range before a game. That's true, right? It's great to get started, to have these sort of really easy goals that you start to take off. But as you get better and better, it is important to add that level of challenge, right? That level of challenge is what's going to get you to become more and more motivated to actually achieve more and more.
Yeah, the longer and harder you had to work towards this goal, when you finally tick it off, the greater the reward in terms of motivation and like excitement you'll feel after actually completing it. If you only had to work like 10 minutes for that goal, all right, okay, you might be happy. But if you had to work a week or a month to get to this long-term, like long-ish term goal,
years in the case of pros, right?
Yeah. It will be incredibly rewarding when you finally are able to tick it off from your whiteboard or progress tracker or whatever you're doing to tick it off. But the more challenging it was, and the longer and more effort you had to put in, the more rewarding this goal will be. Exactly. Don't make it too hard, be realistic, but also don't be too easy on yourself. Those are all ways where we can improve our motivation. Now, some days we just literally don't have any motivation. There are some things that we can do, and we'll get to that. There's some things that will minimize the loss of motivation that we can experience and make sure that slumps happen less often. But there's also some ways where we can actually help prevent the slumps in the first place. Let's go over that first, right? one of the things we can do when wanting to get out of a slump is to reflect on our journey. Look at how much we have improved over the last couple of months. Here, it's very important that we keep some sort of feedback or progress tracker so we can actually visualize and see how much we have improved. Just think about how you played like 2 months ago. Look at the clips you have of that time and realize like, oh, I have actually improved so much. That can be super motivating.
Yeah, exactly. So look back on sort of the improvement that you've had so far, right? It's really easy to just get lost, as I said earlier on, in your thoughts and not really take a step back and reflect on what's happened so far. But actually take a step back and be like, okay, during days that your motivation is low, and those days will happen to everyone, take a step back and be like, I have improved a lot. But on top of that, not just that, but also if you haven't been improving for the past couple of months, and say, for example, you've been actually getting worse, how do you prevent the motivation slump then? Well, in that case, you can look back on the days that you were better back in the day and motivate yourself to get back to that level. And another positive of doing this, of looking back at the times when you were better, is now you don't actually have to worry about the sort of measurable, realistic, somewhat challenging aspect that we talked about earlier. Because you already know that what you've achieved earlier on is possible because you've already achieved it in the past.
Yeah.
So having that mindset of I've already achieved this in the past, I'm gonna get there again, is a great motivator to I guess prevent that motivation slump.
You've literally proven that you have what it takes.
Yeah.
So what's stopping you right now from getting there again? Put in the work again and you will get there to that level again.
If anything, it's going to be easier this time around than it was last time. So yeah, just do it.
Let's talk a little bit about how we can prevent motivation slumps in the first place, though, because preventing them from happening is a lot better than always trying to get out of them. Motivate. Yeah, always trying to motivate ourselves to get out of them. It's a lot better to just prevent them in the first place. So one way where we can really lose motivation is by having too much on your plate. Crow just touched upon the subject of this university student who has deadlines piling up, right? Yes, at a certain point, the extrinsic motivation is going to be enough for you to get started on some. Right. But if you've waited too long, it can be super demotivating. Right. You don't know where to start and there's so much to do. So why start in the first place?
One way to, I guess, avoid having too much on your plate is, I mean, this is a way that I, back in the day, improved my own mindset on. And it's trying to look at the things that you have to do, not vertically, but rather horizontally. And I'll explain what that means. So a lot of times when people have a lot on their plates, they have to get a lot of things done. They have a lot of errands to run, lots of tasks to complete, all that kind of stuff, a lot of projects to work on. We'll sort of have this list, the things that we have to get completed. And people will often feel this pressure above them, right? This feeling of dread of like, all this stuff is piling on top of me, on top of my shoulders. And I feel like that's a sort of vertical way to look at the tasks that you have to complete. If you, however, take a step back and write down all the things that you have to do, or even better, in the first place, don't let them pile up so much, you can sort of put them all in front of you rather than on top of your shoulders in a horizontal manner. And now instead of having all of these things piling up on top of you, you can look at the things that you have to do in a realistic fashion in front of you, right? You can look ahead and be like, okay, I can see the journey I have to go on now, and you can see the end, right? You can see the end point that you can reach there instead of everything just weighing down on you. So write down the things that you have to do, right? Realistically, break them down into smaller components, and even better, don't let them pile up to that degree in the first place.
It transforms the to-do list from a weight on your shoulder to a road plan to get to the goal. You can now see them in order horizontally. Okay, I do this first, and I do this, and I do this, and I do this. And that can be somewhat motivating instead of incredibly demotivating.
Yeah, you take all the stuff that's piling up on top of you and putting them out ahead of you. So just a way easier, I guess, just a slight mindset shift that can really help out.
One other thing is that you can combine smaller tasks. Instead of having 10 things on your to-do list a day, picturing them horizontal will help a little bit, but you can also just combine some of those tasks, make them one thing. That will make it psychologically easier to start them, will make it psychologically easier to do both at the same time, and it will feel like you have a lot less to do. If it's like, oh, I need to go to this shop and that shop for groceries, and I need to get this and this, I need to do shopping today, right?
That's one task, exactly.
One task. Okay, that's one thing to do. It's easy to start, it's easy to keep going, and it's a lot less mental pressure and stress on you on that day.
Exactly. Just one thing to mention there. I said earlier on, break down your tasks into little things, right? And that sort of sounds contradictory to what we're saying right now. But what I meant earlier on is when you have this sort of accumulation of stuff piling on top of you, sometimes you can feel really overwhelmed. You're just like, I'm in this sea of stuff that I have to do. It's not going to be possible. And when you start actually sort of categorizing, maybe is a better word than breaking them down. Maybe when you start categorizing the things that you need to do into sort of actionable things in front of you, that's a great way to sort of not feel as overwhelmed. And as Vic said here, once you have started categorizing these things, start to chunk them together into things that you can, I guess, call one thing rather than like 50 little tasks, which is,
And then get started. Because even doing the first one, even though it might seem so like, what's the point? I'm not going to pass it anyways. Getting started again, even if it's very small steps, will build momentum and will keep you going. You will go and go and go and go and go. It's the only way to get out of the situation feeling accomplished. Get started and keep going. And it will the keep going part will become easier the more of the previous task you've ticked off.
And how does this look in esports settings? What this could be is, we've been, for example, for the past month or so, I've been seeing that my left side flicks, for example, have been terrible. So that's on my plate. I need to improve my left side flicks. On the other hand, there's a new map that's out now. I need to learn that map, right? That's another thing that's on my plate. So I need to learn that one.
And your team has got new strategies.
Exactly.
Your coach
we need to
wants
actually
this
get
from
that
you.
scrim. Exactly. There's a scrim that we're going to be doing later tonight. There's a tournament coming next week, right? We can start to get really overwhelmed, right? Obviously, personal related stuff. So start to categorize these things, break them down into categories, and then, way easier to tackle them one by one in that way.
All right. Another terrible pitfall for motivation is the mindset that only improving will get you motivation. Maintaining skill, maintaining at the level you hit. So hitting your PR, your personal record, again, is a form of improvement too. You are actually, every day you're degressing and your skill is fleeting away from you. If you stop playing for a week, you can really feel that, right? So maintaining and hitting our PR again, or just remaining around the same level, around the same rank, is a form of improvement too. Because if we if we wouldn't be putting in the work, we would be getting worse and worse and worse and worse. So don't get demotivated if you feel like you're stagnating in a particular area. You can actually remind yourself, okay, I'm stagnating for a week now, but I have been putting in the work. Any day now, I'm going to pass my PR. Also, it can be like, okay, I've been stagnating, I've been hitting my PR a couple of times, but it doesn't mean I've decreased in skill. And
like a terrible mindset that a lot of people have is that they believe that the only form of progress is going up, right? They say, if I'm not going up, then I'm not progressing. That's a terrible mindset to have. A lot of times, for example, when we're on a downward trend, right, we're all going to be in slumps at some point, in terrible slumps. But just something like if you visualize a sort of graph where your improvement is on the X and Y axis, just making that line decelerate more, decelerate less is actually a form of improvement. If you're going down in your skill, but you can decrease the amount that you're decreasing by, your skill is decreasing by, that's a form of improvement as well. Don't just feel that if I'm not going up, then I'm not improving, because that's not the case. In a lot of cases, even maintaining your skill can be a great form of improvement, because if there are other pressures in your life, right, that you haven't been able to practice as much, you haven't been able to do X, Y, and Z, whatever, but you're still maintaining your skill, that's improvement, right?
That's impressive as well.
Yeah.
Take pride in that and take motivation from it, right? When you have had a month that was really rough and you barely practice at all, your skill is going down and down and down and down. You might even see that when you start playing again and practicing. You can see like, oh my god, I'm so much worse than I did last time. Now take pride in the fact that you're slowing down the rate you're decreasing skill at, and keep going, right? And eventually, hey, now I'm stagnating. Oh, and now I'm going up again.
Exactly.
That can all be motivating. So don't be demotivated by seeing a loss of progress. Motivate yourself to fix it, and take some motivation from the fact that you can start doing again and start, you are in control. Take motivation from that.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, like motivation breeds motivation. Demotivation breeds demotivation, right? Motivation is essentially like a snowball, right? It's a self-reinforcing loop. If you become motivated and start practicing, you get better. You can get easily motivated from the progress that you're getting right now, right? And this makes you want to practice even more and more and more, which makes you improve more and more and more, which improves your motivation again and again and again, right? It's just a positive feedback loop. That is just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Another mindset people have is basing their motivation on their win rate, and then expecting that they want to win every single time, right? They get really demotivated once they've lost the game. This is a bad mindset to have because it's unrealistic. even the best players in the entire world win like half, like 50 to 70% of their matches. They don't win every single match.
Exactly.
You're being matched up against people of your skill level. If you win 100% of your matches, you would be ranking up so quickly because you would be way underranked, right?
Yeah, but if we follow that through logically, at some point you're going to keep ranking up until you do get to your level. At that point, you will not win all the games then, right? If for example you're an immortal level player, but you've been for some reason ranked into silver, you start winning all your games, brilliant, okay. But at some point you are going to reach a level where you start winning 50% of your games, right? 60% of your games. Don't have your win rate be the sole metric by which you measure your progress, because I mean, if we think about it, poker players and even like hedge fund managers, right? Great investors of our time, people like Warren Buffett, they don't beat the market every single time. They have lots of losers in their stocks as well. The point is, they can, on average, be better than 50%, right? If they're making money 60% of the time, they're making money, right? That's the point.
Yeah. And as we said in other videos, like the practice videos and whatever, you want to be challenging yourself. You want to be pushing yourself, which means you're going to be playing against people that are your level or maybe even higher than your level, because that's even better. You'll improve more, right?
Right.
But you'll also lose more. Losing doesn't mean that you're now worse off. No, take every single one of those losses as something to learn from, and understand that win rate and motivation are not linked. Win rate and success are not linked.
Yeah, and this is something that we've mentioned other videos in the past, but it's something that I keep coming back to, and it's the idea that pros, right, that you might be aspiring to, have not only tried as many times as you have, they failed more times in their careers than you have even tried, right?
Yeah.
Just think about the number of times that you've played a game. The pros have not only played that many games, they've lost that many games. So just keep that in mind.
And positive self-talk comes back here when we make a mistake. Instead of saying, my aim sucked there, or like, I'm bad, right? Say something like, oh, I'll be better, or, okay, I need to work on my aim, or, yes, I'll start aim practicing, right? Those kinds of things. Don't say, oh, I suck. Say, I will be better, because that will motivate you, and it will, instead of demotivating you, it will motivate you, and it will kind of force action immediately. If you say, I will be better, or my aim will be better, you're already kind of on the way to getting... It's a mini spark, and you're on the way to take an action and actually start improving your aim again. You're on the path to adherence.
Yeah, and earlier on we mentioned that, negative pressures are not negative per se. That's true, but when you can help it, try not to be so negative on yourself, right? If you can, instead of saying, I'm so bad, being like, I'm going to get better. That was a terrible, I guess that was bad luck, or that was not as greatly played as I could have done, but I'm going to get better, right? That's just a better mindset to have in general.
Okay, now let's take a step back. Remember when we talked about the graph and the red line and the motivation line, you need to surpass that. We talked about the spark. The spark is the initial increase of that line to above the red line. We are inspired. We really want to start doing something. We just need to translate it into action. But at least with the spark, we are motivated enough to do something. We're above the red line. Next, this spark transforms into motivation, right? When we start doing something, it becomes motivation. This was the longer yearning to do something or to get somewhere. It's more goal-oriented, but it waxes and wanes. You can see this as a sort of sine wave. If you're not super mathematical, that's like an up and down wave kind of graph, where it goes above the red line and below the red line, above the red line, below the red line. So what this means is, on some days, will not have enough motivation to actually do the task. No matter how many motivation tricks we use, because a lot of when we go down, you can use a lot of tricks to get it back up. Motivation is always on a downward trend. It's always going down if we don't actually do something to keep it up. By using all the tricks we've talked about so far, we can keep it somewhat steady, but it will still dip below the red line on some days. What do we do on those days?
Yeah, on the days where, as we define it, your motivation is too low to actually do something, right? You're so demotivated that you will not do it based on motivation alone. On those days, what we do is we use discipline and willpower. But that's a subject for another time.
Yeah. We will go over willpower and discipline in the next episode of the podcast, and then we'll go over habits, which is the long-term goal, where the activity or routine that we want to adhere to becomes easy and automated. That's the state we really want to reach. We'll go over habits in the next episode after that. So episode 3 will be discipline, episode 4 will be habits. stay tuned for those.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for watching so far, and hope to see you in the next podcast.
Yes. Also, remember, every one of the sources we talked about in this video are down below in the comments.
Thank you for watching.
Bye-bye.